against my will. And the only civilized person that I met happens to be this guy in suburban London. And it's you Europeans who are the barbarians, not the rest of us. So having explained his lack of motivation, he's coerced to do this. He does it because he's forced. Our hero, or our anti-hero, our coward, as he calls himself, starts getting into his errand, which is to find this man so that he can kill him, so that the man's name will be published in the newspaper and give the information to the opposing side. As he describes his state of mind, on 2876, rather like the crouched tiger you had in Pushkin that German thought he was, he makes it into a game, a heroic game, where he could be somebody. At the top of 2876, he says, "From this broken state, I passed into an almost abject felicity. I told myself that the duel had already begun and that I had won. The first encounter by frustrating, even if for 40 minutes, even if by a stroke of fate, the attack of my adversary. I argued that this slightest of victories foreshadowed a total victory. I argued, no less fallaciously, that my cowardly felicity proved that I was a man capable of carrying out the adventure successfully." So he plays mental games with himself, getting himself up for what he's about to do, trying to persuade himself that since it's going well now, it's going to end well for him as well. And he's given instructions about how to find the house of this person he doesn't know, but that he's going to kill, just because of what the name is of that man. And the particular instructions he's given at the bottom of 2876 are that he has to continually turn left, turn left, turn left, turn left. And he's quite right. If you know a lot of traditional mazes, you always get lost if you alternate between right and left, but if you always go left, you'll manage to solve the maze. So is he in some kind of puzzle that's been created by a malicious or maybe a good-intentioned divinity, some greater power, or is it just a vicious game? On 2878, he initially eludes the person who's tailing him and makes his way to the house, to Stephen Albert, and that's going to be the crucial detail, is what is the last name of the person whose house it is. And the two of them have an extraordinary conversation about a garden that no longer exists except in a book and in the way in which it's imagined as recreated in Britain. And Albert, who's a sinologist, he's a specialist in Chinese, despite being what the narrator calls a barbarous Englishman, imagines how gardens and books and perhaps even worlds are infinite. At the bottom of 2878, he says, when he came across the letter that has the plan of the garden, Albert says, "I had questioned myself about the ways in which a book can be infinite. I could think of nothing other than a cyclic volume, a circular one, a book whose last page was identical with the first, a book which had the possibility of continuing indefinitely." There actually is a book that's a little bit like this by James Joyce called Finnegan's Wake. And so as we imagine this infinite cycling around in circles, repeating and repeating so that the beginning and the ending are the same in this book, Albert invites our narrator to reflect on whether actual lived life is rather like these iterated fractal equations that I began with, or like this book that as soon as you get to the end, it starts again because the last sentence begins the first sentence. And he reflects on what type of scenario the two of them are finding themselves in. So in the middle of the paragraph at the top of 2879, and now it's Albert who's talking, in all fictional works, each time a man is confronted with several alternatives, he chooses one and eliminates the others. In the fiction of Sirpen, he chooses simultaneously all of them. He creates, in this way, diverse futures, diverse times, which themselves also proliferate and fork. Here then is the explanation of the novel's contradictions. Fang, let us say, has a secret. A stranger calls at his door. Fang resolves to kill him. Naturally, there are several possible outcomes. Fang can kill the intruder. The intruder can kill Fang. They both can escape. They both can die, and so forth. But of course, in the work of the novel, the moment before the choice is made, all of those futures, this is part of the multiple futures or many worlds theory that's very current in contemporary string theory and various other technical fields. So the thing that's most upsetting and concerning to Albert, and also to the Chinese writers of the text and designers of the gardens, is the problem of time. When do you go so far forward in time that one particular potential, one particular path has been chosen and all the others fall away? And the only way the others come back is if you repeat the path. That's what he notes at the top of 2880. And at the bottom of 2880, he'll consider the implications of this network of times which approached one another, forked, broke off, or were unaware of one another for centuries, embraces all possibilities of time. Thinking about himself and about the virtual selves that could exist at any given moment, he continues, we do not exist in the majority of these times. In some you exist, and not I. In others I, and not you. In others both of us. In the present one, which a favorable fate has granted me, you have arrived at my house. In another, while crossing the garden, you found me dead. In still another, I uttered these same words, but I am a mistake. I am a ghost. Not in all. Time forks perpetually towards innumerable futures. In one of them, I am your enemy. So before we get to the very last piece, I want to give you just one moment of probably the most famous film, literally the Wachowskis have thrown out there consistently how much Borges helped them to imagine the world of the Matrix. Before we get to the ending, this is the last quotation from the main body of the story on 2881. Our narrator will reply, the future already exists, but I am your friend. Could I see the letter again? So I want you thinking about this complex philosophical conversation between Albert and the narrator to think about how those are adapted and transformed in this little moment from the Wachowskis' Matrix.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? I was. Look again. Who's it? This isn't the Matrix.
No. It's another training program designed to teach you one thing. If you are not one of us, you are one of them.
What are they?
Sentient programs. They can move in and out of any software still hardwired to their system. That means that anyone we haven't unplugged is potentially an agent. Inside the Matrix, they are everyone, and they are no one. We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
Someone.
I won't lie to you, Neil. Every single man or woman who has stood their ground, everyone who has fought an agent has died. But where they have failed, you will succeed.
Why?
I've seen an agent punch through a concrete wall. Men have emptied entire clips at them and hit nothing but air. Yet their strength and their speed are still based in a world that is built on rules. Because of that, they will never be as strong or as fast as you can be.
What are you trying to tell me? That I can dodge bullets?
No, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.
I'll stop just at that moment. People always take pleasure in looking at whether there's one or two guns reflected in Morpheus's glasses. Like the Matrix, which is a system through which each of our psychologies is run with the delusion that we are actually living out a freely determined, willed existence. Borges suggests, and therefore inspires the Wachowskis, that that may be the way that life works more generally. We're plugged into an expected life, the life of a crime story, the life of a spy story, the life of a world war, the life of a pandemic. And we get to run the system through thinking that we are making choices, but ultimately realizing that what we're doing is cutting off possibilities until we end up at the conclusion that is the only one left. The only one left actually takes only one paragraph to write. As Borges himself concludes, the rest of what happens is insignificant. So what happens? He's talking to the German. He's talking to Albert. The German Chinese agent is talking to Albert. He has to shoot Albert so that it gets reported. Madden does in fact catch up with him, arrests him, puts him on trial. The kind of thing he's being accused of is treason, which is a capital offense, and he will be killed. The story ends almost with an ironic note saying, what happens to me, what happens to each of these individuals, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter much at all. All that mattered was getting the name Albert in the paper so that the military activities could continue, not continue as planned. So it's a clever story. It's a highly philosophical and abstract story. I hope it's one that you enjoyed reading. Again, Borges, he's got several wonderful collections, this one as well as one called Visiones, and I recommend them to you highly. But he's asking you something very, very simple. You've now read a very specific story about two, especially, individual human beings who would never have appeared in a history book. What they did, the small thing that they did, affected everything on that day, affected thousands of lives on that day, but you wouldn't even know who they are. You would never have heard of them. You would not pay any attention to them. So do we want to hear those kinds of stories? Do we want to experience something along those lines? Or, by contrast, are we interested in continuing to function only at the level of large and macro numbers? One of the things that's strongly in common between Borges and Achebe is they're going to ask you to spend time with someone who we are invited to see inside their world. And the world and the individual, in the case of Achebe, obviously a spy, in the case of Borges, is not a hero. They're not a king, even a badly behaved king like Gilgamesh, or a prince like Hamlet. They're not even admirable in the way that some of our very positive characters have been. But we're asked to think about whether, like all the names that could be counted today, like all the names that are on the Vietnam War Memorial or on the World War I memorials, both on the UT campus and around the UK, whether those names matter any less because they weren't someone important. So this text is in many ways a clever but also a somber one. Achebe's is a very serious one, and I invite you to read it with attention and with care. It's about the life of an individual in pre-colonial and then right at colonial Nigeria. And you're invited to try to live with Okonkwo in his culture and in his time in a way that Achebe thought, even though he was a journalist, was at least as, if not more impactful than writing a piece of journalistic prose would have been. There are things novels can do, that fiction can do, that other things maybe cannot. Or at least they're a good complement to what shows up in news broadcasts and in journalistic reporting. So I hope that you have a safe and comfortable Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'll look forward to connecting with you over Achebe on Thursday again. Please take care, and bye-bye till next time.